All right, beautiful. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, tonight we're going to be doing Melacha number 23, Melechet Tofer. Tofer literally means sewing. And as with all the other Melachot, although the Av Melacha in the Mishkan was sewing, which what they did was they had 10 curtains that they needed to sew into 5 sets of 2 curtains each. So they were attaching these 2 separate curtains and making them into 1 unit. So too, whenever you combine any 2 items, in this case, we're talking usually about soft items, like pieces of cloth, paper, you're putting them into a single entity, and you're doing this through sewing or pinning or gluing or any other means, that gets the status of the melacha of tofer, of sewing. So, it doesn't have to literally be sewing with a needle. It could be any kind of method in which you combine 2 of these items together. Usually when we talk about harder items like wood and things like that, that usually we would consider to be boneh, building. But when you're talking about these softer types of things, usually we refer to sewing as the melacha. So, a couple of easy, simple examples. So, let's say you have a torn piece of paper, and you decide that you want to tape both sides of the torn page together. That would be, believe it or not, in the category of sewing. You're not sewing, but you are attaching, you're combining 2 items to form them into 1 unit. Similarly, if you would staple sheets of a paper, 2 sheets of paper together, that would be considered an act of sewing, even though it's not sewing literally, but you are attaching the 2 pages together through the act of stapling. Clear? So far, so good? Amazing. Okay. So now there are a lot of things that fall into this category. And I think the first thing to talk about is diapers. Diapers have some issues that relate to tofer. The first question you have to ask yourself is, those tabs that you put on the front of the diaper, right? When you finally put it on the baby, then you take those 2 and put it around and you glue them to the front. So is that considered to be tofer or not? If we just said you combine something to make it into 1 thing, is that called tofer? So the answer is no, it's fine. It's not a problem of tofer. And the reasons that we're going to give are going to be critical to understanding the rest of the laws of tofer. So number 1, it's temporary. You don't mean to keep on those tabs glued onto the diaper. Eventually, you're going to take them off. Okay, so therefore, it's not going to be a problem because of the fact that number 1, it's temporary. So automatically, it at worst would be rabbinic. Now, more correctly, there's a rule called derech tashmisho, which means that if this is the way that it was meant to be used, then it's not considered to have been a melacha in the first place. For example, nobody would ever say that if you open a door, you just destroyed a building or destroyed a structure. In the same way, if you close the door, you didn't just build a building, right, to complete a structure. You are simply using the door. The door was built to be opened and closed. Here too, this was meant to be put on the baby and then taken off. So you're using it in the manner in which it was meant to be used. And therefore, it's not considered to be an act of taking 2 independent items and combining them into 1 unit, and you have now created a new unit called this new thing. But rather you're using the diaper in the way it was meant to be used. So therefore there was no creative act involved at all. Like what?
Staple. Using staples, I use.
No, that's correct. But the point is that a stapler, 2 pages are not meant to be united as one. You decided that you are creating them. You want to unite them together as one. You understand? You're right, a stapler is a tool that's meant to be used like that, but the 2 papers are not necessarily meant to be brought together. But the tabs of the diaper are meant to go onto the diaper and glue themselves to that body of the diaper. See what I'm saying? Yeah, that's the idea. That's why it wouldn't be considered an act of tofer. Welcome. Okay, great. Now, let's continue. So therefore, there's no problem to put the front of the tabs onto the front of the diaper. Now, the big question is the following. But remember, there were 2 parts to that heter. The first part was that it's temporary, meaning when you put on the tabs of the diaper onto the front, so then it's not going to stay like that forever because you're eventually going to take it off of the baby when he's done using it. So now the question is, well, what happens when people take off the diaper is they roll up the diaper, then they take those tabs and put it back onto the diaper itself to keep it closed. That, according to some, is a problem of tofer. The reason is because at this point, the diaper is going to be closed for good. It will not be undone. Now, you could argue and say, well, yeah, but that's how it was meant to be, meaning it's meant to be used like that. Well, that's not really necessarily true. Who said that you have to, meaning to put it on the baby, you need that, not necessarily when you take it off the baby do you need that. You could just roll it up and throw it in the garbage. But if you decide you want to keep it closed because of that, so therefore, that, according to some poskim, is tofer, and it's problematic because you're taping it permanently. So far, so good?
So can you do it or?
You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it.
What was the name you said, Derek what?
Hashmisho, the manner in which it's usually used. All righty. Now, okay, so that's important to know about a diaper. So somebody wants to ask, well, what about buttoning a button? Isn't that like an act of tofer? Because look, you're taking both sides of the shirt, you're combining them to be one item. So again, that's not really tofer because you're not attaching 2 separate parts. Tofer takes 2 separate things that are not one unit and makes them into one unit. And they don't come off, they don't detach. A button could be undone without tearing. In other words, when you sew, let's say, one item to another, in order to undo that, you have to like rip them apart from each other. That's a sign that they were sewn together. So that's what would be considered tofer. But to button a button would not be a problem. So therefore, you're allowed to button a shirt, you're allowed to button the covers of a quilt, things like that would not be considered an act of tofer.
So, sorry, if it's something that you have to like kind of destroy, to take it apart, that's what makes it tofer.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you where this comes up, interestingly enough. There's a difference. I know that Rabbi Ribiat in his book discusses a difference between tags that are hanging from a shirt or a suit. Let's say you bought a brand new shirt and there's a tag with one of those long plastic things with a tag coming out, I don't know, $29.99, right? And he says you're allowed to take a pair of scissors and just cut it right off, no problem. Why? Because it's not like it's sewn onto the item. It's not one with the item. It's just kind of dangling from it. It's different. It says, but if let's say you forgot the laundry tag on your shirt, you know, that little thing that they staple onto your shirt. So that is like being sewn on because they stapled it. So it became like one with your shirt. So for you to rip that off, that you can't do. I would venture to say it's probably the same thing for those things that they have on the front, on the sleeve of the suit. When you buy a new suit, they have those little things that are like kind of pushed into the suit. Not, you know what I'm talking about? Like the name of the brand. They put it in like a piece of cloth on the front of the suit, but they staple it, or it's kind of sewn in. You have to, stitched in. That would be a problem to take that out. That would be a problem of Korea, which Lena will learn next week.
And also, like when they have there's like a split in the suit jacket, so obviously you couldn't because if you just pull it, it would come apart. You know when they you get a new suit and then in the back by the thing,
you have to undo those.
you just pull it apart.
Right. That you shouldn't do. Right. You wouldn't do that. Correct. Very good.
You can take tags off.
One of those dangling tags, though, you could. Yeah. Okay. Now, so the question becomes, so Tofer means that you are stitching them together, attaching them together. So the question becomes, what about safety pins? So there are a bunch of different opinions regarding safety pins. The first opinion comes up in a few places, and this is the view of the Ben Ish Chai. He explains that with a pin or a safety pin, there's a difference between whether you penetrate with the pin 2 times or 3 times. And he says that 2 times is okay, 3 times is not okay, and the Mishnah Berurah agrees to that opinion. Chacham Ovadia goes on to say that even 3 is no problem. Now, this whole thing is when you intend to leave it that way for quite some time, where they consider it to be tofer if you leave it there, let's say for more than 7 days. So you put in 3 penetrations of your safety pin. That is when these, at least it's much worse when you intend to leave it there for a long time. But if you are leaving it there for less than 7 days, for example, something happened, I don't know what, and maybe the slit by the skirt somehow got opened up too high. Who knows what the situation is? You need to keep it closed. So it's just for Shabbat. Then you're going to fix it after Shabbat, right? So then there's much more room to be lenient because it's a less than 7 day thing. So that's important as well. Now, sometimes ladies like to wear something, I think they call it a brooch, right?
Mm-hmm.
A brooch is one of those like pins that you pin into your, it could be a suit, it could be a hat that people like to put it on. So the question is that okay? So I saw the poskim say that if you're putting it on for the first time on the hat, that's a problem, because that would be considered like making a new vessel, mitaken mana, which means you're like making something into a new item. You shouldn't do that. So don't put it on the suit for the first time. Don't put it on on a hat for the first time. However, what if it was already on? So therefore, you're not creating anything new. It was already there before Shabbat, but then it fell off. So then, again, we're back to the same question. So ideally, you should put it back with 2 penetrations and not 3. Okay, because that you intend to leave on for a while. You intend to leave it on for good. So when you want to put that brooch back onto the hat, which people have these things, I've seen them. So you want to make sure that you put it in once, twice, and then lock it up, not a 3rd time. Because again, you're taking 2 items and you're attaching them. Okay. Clear?
There's some difference between the 2 and the 3.
So the 3, it seems like it's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit more of a, it's in, out, in, out, in, out. It's already like stitched in. You already did enough of a significant act that it's the Melacha of the Mishkan. Less than that, yeah.
So for returning a brooch, why would we say 2 penetrations? Instead of
whenever there's a heavy duty machloket that somebody would say, oh, that's an isur d'oraita, we try to avoid it. You know what I'm saying? Ideally. So that's why. Okay. Now, the next question is also interesting. Can you attach a hood to a coat through a zipper? Right? Or is that considered taking something that was meant to be there and just putting it on? How would you view that? So over here, as always, you have again a machloket. You have different opinions. And therefore, in other words, some would say that, look, this is the way it's meant to be. I mean, this hood is meant to be on this zipper. It's derech tashmisho. This is how this hood is used. It's put on when you need it. It's taken off when you don't need it. There's really no issue. Some want to say, no, you're taking two items and you're putting them together. And you're leaving it there for good, for the whole winter. So, that's reason to say not to do it. So definitely, if you know you're going to use it, it's better to do it before Shabbat. But if you see it's raining and it's not on, and you need it, so you definitely have what to rely on. Yeah.
So I've had it where it's like raining and I want to put fur off. So we don't get rid of it. So am I allowed to do that on Shabbat? It's attached with the zipper.
Yeah, this is the same exact question. So there are those that will tell you it's no problem. And if you're afraid the fur is going to get ruined, then yeah, you'd be allowed to. Okay. So another important example of this idea of derech tashmisho is Velcro on shoes. The idea is that the Velcro strap is meant to be fastened and unfastened and tightened and untightened. It's just how it's meant to be. So therefore, the fact that you close it is not going to be a problem. Same thing with, let's say, these ace bandage clips. You know those clips that when you have the whatever you wrap around, what? The metal thing that, yeah, those also would not be a problem. But what would be a problem? Let's say tape. Tape is a real problem when you tape something together, tape two pieces of paper together, or even if you look at, let's say, one of these books on the bookshelf, right? If, let's say, the tape on one of these books curls up on the bottom, but people without thinking, just kind of flatten it out and make it nice and smooth all again. Oh, you just taped on Shabbat. You took, because what they do when they tape these books is they kind of take it apart and then put the pieces back together with the tape so that it's nice and strong. But so now you're taping them all together again. That's no good. You can't tape it. Also, there are times where you might not realize it, but you're gluing. Like a lot of these picture albums, when you want to put pictures back into a picture album, they have like a little bit of a glue on the spot where the picture goes so that it stays there and it doesn't move. So if you take the picture and you glue it onto the picture album, again, it resembles Tofer because you take this item separate from this picture album, put them together, and now the glue binds them. So you can't do that.
Like pulling it off one that's already glued.
If it's already glued and you're pulling it off, so that would be a Korea problem, right? Because they were bound together. If you are putting them together, that's a Tofer problem.
Wait, but not like a photo album that you like slide in pictures.
Slide in, slide out. It's not bound together in the first place. I'm saying the ones that have like a glue on it. I've seen those. Yeah.
Even if it like falls down, you can't fix it. Like let's say you're looking at an album in the picture. Like sometimes the glue is not so strong.
Right.
Because it's old.
So now you want to glue it back on.
Sure.
So if you're just putting it back and you're not actually gluing it on, okay, you didn't glue it on. But if you're really gluing it on, that's a problem. Again, something that you have that's not really meant to stay there and it's not really being bound to let's say one of these, any kind of suction toy, suction cup, for the kids, that's not going to be a problem. It's going to be fine because that's not meant to be there. And this is how you're not really attaching your suction item to the table or to the floor. It's just there for the kids to play with and not spill. So that's not called tofer. You see what I'm saying?
But suction cup is really an issue?
That's what I'm saying. It's not an issue.
No, not, it's not a toy, like it's something you wanted to stay there. Like, let's say, the sink where you put the sponges,
Okay.
with the suction.
Okay.
It falls off the sink. Can you put it back?
You're saying, I want this thing to be here.
It always.
But did you really attach them together? They're not really attached.
Like push it back into the sink.
Yeah, I hear. Something that's more of a permanent thing, you're saying.
I mean, like you could take it off, but it's meant to be there. I don't know. I had no idea suction.
I don't think that it's a Melacha of Tofer, because usually the Melacha of Tofer involves bringing in something external to combine the two, like you are sewing, you are gluing, you're taping. Yeah, this is just removing air. I don't think that's what I'm thinking, to be honest with you. But I don't know. I wouldn't think that that's a problem. I think also usually they're meant to attach and detach.
Right. Right.
As you please. In other words, let's say you decide you want it over here. So you know what I'm saying? So you move it from there to here. It's not really permanent. Yeah. Okay. I saw an interesting chidush about Band-Aids. Band-Aids, you're allowed to put a Band-Aid on, but they do say that you should not wrap the Band-Aid around itself. So in other words, the normal way we wrap a Band-Aid is we wrap it in a circle, and you eventually bring the sticky part back onto itself, and now you just kind of taped it or glued it to itself. So that the poskim say not to do. Instead, put the Band-Aid lengthwise so that it's sticking to your finger, and both sides are like this, from here to there.
I'm like literally sitting here with my Band-Aid. Very applicable.
Well, you could, in theory, you could, let's say, wrap it like
Spiral.
a spiral, not in itself, I guess. Yeah, it's an interesting point. Stickers in general, you don't want to play with stickers on Shabbat, because the idea is that if you want to leave it there for good, so you're taping something onto the whatever book or whatever you're doing. Now the question is, what about a sticky note or a sticky bookmark? So that might be a little bit different, because those are not meant to stay there. They're meant to be moved, and they're easy to remove. In other words, they're not like a regular sticker like the kids come home from the doctor with, that they put it on some random chair and now you have to scrape it off with God knows what kind of, solution in order to get rid of this thing, or on carpet or wherever they put it, right? So now, because this thing was meant to be moved, this thing was meant to show you your place in the book, or it was meant to be there as a reminder. But if now it's blocking the words that you're reading and you want to move it, well, I don't have to tear it apart from anything. I don't have to scrub it off. It's one of those sticky, where just the top is sticky and you want to take it off, and it was meant to be moved and it's easy to remove. So it's not going to be considered sewn onto the paper. See what I'm saying? That'd be okay, yeah. Can you attach it to something? Like, do you have to attach it to itself? Okay, that's good. Yeah, but it's not permanent, and it's easy to pull off. Like if you would have to tape it onto itself, like the Band-Aid, that would be more of an issue, right? But this is just going on to your flesh, right? Okay. Okay. Push pins onto a wall or onto one of these boards, when you put a push pin, that's also something which could be considered problematic because, again, that paper is not meant to be on that bulletin board. You decided you want to put it on that bulletin board, and the way you attach the two is through a push pin. So that would be an issue too. No using push pins on Shabbat. And something called fun tack. You guys familiar with fun tack? What? Yeah, I guess so. So if you want to use fun tack, again, these things also have other problems too. By the way, the fun tack, I think, smears. Like you push down on it, it kind of smears. So that's a different issue. But if you're attaching two things with the fun tack, that would be a problem. The big question that comes out literally when it comes to sewing is stitches. What happens if, God forbid, somebody gets a deep cut and they need to get stitches on Shabbat? So, we don't want somebody, God forbid, to be in danger. But at the same time, if it's something that is not life-threatening or not threatening to a limb of the body, it's just something that could if it's done by somebody else, it would be just as fine. So the poskim say that it would be better to use a goy to do the stitches, right? Because that's literally Tofer. That's literally considered to be an act of Tofer.
How do you know? Sometimes you can't really-
What?
You can't really ask sometimes.
Correct. So that's why it's important to be aware ahead of time of what would constitute any kind of need. God forbid, if somebody breaks any kind of arm, any kind of body part, we would view that as life-threatening, actually, because God forbid it might what?
Just have a skull.
Yes. So that's why it's better to have a goy, because what would you say to a doctor, a Jewish doctor, if the doctor says, look, with 3 stitches, this person will be fine. It'll just be ugly, right? If I do 5 stitches, the person will be much better looking. Can I do 5 or do I have to do 3? Right? So what do you say to the guy? As far as Shabbat, he's able to do it with 3. Why wouldn't he do it with 3? But if you go to a goy, then you don't have that problem. You understand? Yeah. See what I'm saying? Okay.
I have a weird question.
Yes.
What if your nail breaks? Can you glue it back together if it's technically gonna grow out and be cut off?
How do you want to glue it? You want to literally glue?
There's nail glue. Like if you break your nail, sometimes it could be painful.
Yeah.
Can I so I'm in that situation. I'm this. It's very painful. Can I put glue and put it back?
Oh, gee. I don't think so. I think you'd be better off, let's say, asking a goy to just maybe remove it.
The nail?
Yeah. Or to maybe the goy can glue it. Could be in a serious, painful situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
You might have more of a leniency.
And take it over if it's not clutching each other.
Yeah. Band-aid. That I don't know, actually. That I don't know. I take that back.
Really? But what's the difference between a cut on your finger and your nail?
You're not bringing 2 pieces together. I'm just covering a cut. Meaning, by your case of a nail, you have 2 pieces that are set. Now, it could be that the nail is still considered to be one. It depends probably how it was cut.
If it breaks from a place where it's not supposed to break, half of it's still on your nail bed and half of it is hanging, kind of. Mm-hmm. So it'd be more pain to kind of remove it. It has to kind of stay on. It's not an option to pull it up.
It's not an option to pull it up. So it still is considered to be one.
So it would worsen.
Yes. Okay. Maybe there's more reason to be lenient if it's in the middle of your nail. I was imagining it's on the top of your nail and like the part that goes
So it's
above
like
your flesh.
bleeding, there's blood, it's like fully in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah, okay, so yeah,
Completely.
yeah. So that makes more sense. It's still attached, you're saying, anyway. So you're just covering. So so then that would be okay.
And is there a difference for Yom Tov?
In this?
Yeah.
Not really.
No.
The only thing that, I mean, potentially could be a difference is if you want to sew, if you want to, let's say, sometimes they put chicken inside of a string of some sort. They want to maybe bring it in and out like that on the chicken, for food purposes, perhaps it might be okay.
But not for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just read to you what he says over here about Band-Aids. He says, "Badbakata plaster al etzbaot." When we're talking about Band-Aids on your finger, באופן שהפלסטר נכרח סביב האצבע, in a way that the Band-Aid goes around your finger, וחוזר ונדבק על עצמו, and it is going to be glued back onto itself. He says, over al melechet Tofer. You are violating the Melacha of Tofer, of sewing. מפני שדרכן של רוב בני אדם, להוריד את הפלסטר בעודו מודבק, because a lot of people, he says, actually remove the Band-Aid while it's still attached like that, just kind of slip it off. ונחשב כמדביק לקיום. It's like gluing it for a long time. He does say, however, אבל אם בשעה שיוריד את הפלסטר, הפלסטר יפתח, if let's say, however, he does, okay, I'm glad I'm reading this inside. If, let's say, you have in mind to open up the Band-Aid, right? Then he says it would be okay. So in other words, if you go into this thing saying to yourself, I'm wrapping it around my finger, having in mind to undo it, meaning not to leave it this way, then there's more reason to be makil. Because you don't have in mind to leave it that way for 7 days.
You're saying if like you roll the Band-Aid,
What?
like when you put the Band-Aid on the rolling?
Yeah. So you have in mind to leave it, to undo it, to not leave it. In other words, if you plan on just slipping it off, you have a problem because you're wrapping it like that for good. So that's an issue. But if you wrap it up with the intention of unwrapping it before 7 days, that would be okay.
But then what if you don't? If you have the intention that you don't.
So don't do that.
Like you forget to.
Okay. So yeah, it is better than the average guy who means to do that, but it turns out you did a Melacha, so it's not good. Yeah.
What Band-Aid stays on for 7 days?
No,
Right.
like literally look how my Band-Aid came off, like I'm gonna throw it out like that. So it's saying it's not
Oh,
permanent, because I'm gonna trash it, I'm not,
Right.
I can't unwrap it.
Can you unwrap it once it's off the finger?
What?
Does that count? Maybe it's slipped off.
Yeah.
Like, should you?
Yeah. Unwrap it. Yeah, sure. And the one thing that you have to watch out for, by the way, a lot of times when you undo diapers, they rip, right? So it's important to try to avoid that if you can. Okay. All right, I think I'm done. Chazakim Bruchim.
Can I ask
Very
you
good.
2 questions?
Yes.
What is the deal with toes?